The night was supposed to be mine. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of loyalty, 20 years of me holding him up every time he stumbled. A celebration in the middle of Chicago, champagne towers, our names on the banner. Happy anniversary, Helena and Richard Simmons. I should have been walking in on his arm, smiling for the cameras. Instead, I walked in alone, heels clicking against the marble, already sensing something was off. It hit me the moment I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the ballroom in a red silk dress cut far too high, laughing too loud, sipping on champagne she hadn't paid for. My husband's hand rested on the small of her back like it belonged there. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy whispering in her ear. My stomach turned. That was our night. I'd been promised a vow renewal, a speech about our love, a dance to the same song that played at our wedding. Instead, I was watching my husband of 2 decades paw a woman young enough to call me auntie. I'd prepared myself. I wasn't stupid. The late nights at the office, the gym memberships, the sudden work trips. I'd been piecing it together. And tonight, I decided to end it on my terms. Before leaving the house, I'd slipped a packet of itchy powder into the lining of his suit jacket. A childish move? Maybe. But I knew humiliation would be the only language he understood. When he finally noticed me, he froze for half a second. Then he smirked, like I was the one intruding. "Helena, you made it," he said, voice dripping with false charm. He didn't even bother moving his hand from her back. I walked right past him, grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing tray, and said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss watching you make a fool of yourself." He tried to keep the night under control, rushing to the stage when the announcer called him up for his big speech. That was his fatal mistake. The powder was already working. At first, he tugged at his collar, subtle enough that only I noticed. Then came the scratching. Neck, arms, chest. His voice cracked as he tried to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he rasped, then scratched harder. The room started buzzing. Cameras tilted up from their dinner tables. Guests whispered, not about the anniversary, but about his red, blotchy skin. The mistress, bless her stupidity, rushed to his side and patted him down like she could fix it. That only made it worse. He shoved her hand away, but not before the crowd saw the raw red streak spreading across his neck. I raised my glass. "You should sit down, Richard," I called from my table. "You look like you've been caught red-handed." The pun landed better than I expected. A ripple of laughter cut through the murmurs. He glared at me, eyes wild, sweat dripping down his temple. "What the hell did you do, Helena?" I stood, walked toward the stage, and placed my champagne flute right at the edge of the podium. "Me? Oh no, darling. You did this to yourself the moment you decided to drag your mistress to our anniversary gala." Gasps erupted around the room. Phones came up. People live-streamed because of course they did. That's how betrayal spreads these days. Not through whispers, but through hashtags. The mistress finally found her voice. "She's crazy. Don't listen to her." I cut her off. "Sweetheart, do yourself a favor. Go back to whatever cheap bar he found you in. You're not built for this level of humiliation." Her face burned crimson, and she stormed off, leaving him scratching and sputtering alone. The audience loved it. Some of them clapped. Some shook their heads. But every single person in that room now knew the truth. Richard lunged toward me, desperate to salvage some dignity. "We can talk about this at home, Helena." I laughed in his face. "Home? The place where I paid the bills? The house I made into a family while you were sneaking around? No, Richard, there is no home anymore." And then I slapped him. Not a weak emotional slap, but a deliberate one. Loud, sharp, echoing across the ballroom. His cheek flamed red to match the rash crawling up his skin. A silence fell, broken only by the click of cameras. I leaned in close enough for him to hear me over the silence. "You just dug your own grave, and I'll be the one throwing in the dirt." Then I turned, grabbed my clutch, and walked out. The sound of his scratching, the murmur of the crowd, the humiliation hanging in the air. I left it all behind me. The cold Chicago night hit me like a second slap, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that ballroom. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I didn't even look back. My heels struck the pavement as I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end, Richard. It's the beginning. And when I'm finished, you won't have a name left to ruin." That was my vow. Not a vow of renewal, not a vow of marriage, a vow of revenge. When I met Richard, I wasn't Helena Simmons, the 42-year-old woman with battle scars. I was Helena Bennett, 22, freshly graduated, wide-eyed and ready to take on Chicago. He was ambitious, charming in a way that felt intoxicating. He had that confidence men wear like a tailored suit, even back when he was broke and still driving a beat-up sedan. He said we were going to build an empire together, and like a fool in love, I believed him. I poured myself into that dream. While he hustled through law school, I worked 2 jobs, one as a receptionist, another waitressing nights. I paid the rent, cooked dinners, and kept the lights on. When my parents died, I inherited a modest sum. I didn't use it to travel or start a business of my own. No, I handed it over to Richard, who promised it would secure our future. That money became the seed capital for his first office downtown. When our daughter Madison was born, I traded my career goals for motherhood. I was the one who stayed home, who managed the endless doctor's visits, the school projects, the playdates. Richard loved to parade us around at firm functions like trophies, smiling for photos with the perfect family. Behind the smiles, though, I carried the weight. The truth was, every promotion I turned down, every dream I shelved, was another brick in the foundation of his success. I should have noticed sooner. The late-night emergencies at the office, the gym sessions that went from an hour to 3, the way his phone never left his side, flipped face down on the counter. When I asked, he laughed it off. "Paranoia doesn't suit you, Helena," he'd say, kissing my cheek before heading out the door. I wanted to believe him. After 20 years, you don't think the man you sacrificed everything for would look you in the eye and lie. The first real crack came from Madison. One evening, she found me in the kitchen, staring at a half-cooked dinner I no longer had the energy to finish. She hesitated, then slid her phone across the counter. "Mom, you need to see this." It was Richard, clear as day, arms around another woman outside a restaurant. Not just one photo. A series of them, each one more damning than the last. Him holding her hand. Him leaning in, lips too close to her ear. Him opening the door to the same black Mercedes he drove home every night. My hands shook as I scrolled. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "Instagram," she said quietly. "Her account isn't private. I think she wanted you to see." That gutted me more than the photos. The audacity of this woman, flaunting her affair with my husband, tagging locations I'd been to with him. I could smell the perfume through the screen. I wanted to throw the phone, but Madison's eyes were on me. Scared, protective, angry. "Mom," she said, her voice firm despite the quiver. "It's not just rumors anymore. He's cheating. You can't ignore it." And just like that, the illusions I'd clung to shattered. 20 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and compromise collapsed under the weight of a truth I could no longer deny. I wasn't just a wife betrayed. I was a woman robbed of decades I could never get back. But grief wasn't what filled me that night. It was resolve. If Richard thought he could humiliate me, steal my years, and walk away clean, he didn't know me at all. The morning after the gala, I stared at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger. Not the humiliated wife from last night, not the loyal caretaker who gave up everything for a man who didn't deserve it. No, the woman staring back at me had fire in her eyes. I'd spent too long being patient, too long forgiving, too long hoping he'd change, that Helena was gone. I poured myself a black coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out my laptop. The first thing I did was log into our joint accounts. He'd always assumed I didn't understand the finances, which was his first mistake. I'd tracked every deposit, every withdrawal, every credit line. He'd made the money, sure, but I was the one who kept it from disappearing. With a few clicks, I transferred my inheritance accounts fully into my name, freezing the joint ones so he couldn't touch them. I felt an almost giddy satisfaction imagining him at some store later, card declined in front of his precious mistress. Next came the lawyer. I'd met with one months earlier, after the first late-night meetings didn't sit right with me. I'd kept the card tucked in my wallet, waiting for the day I'd need it. That day had arrived. I dialed the number, my voice steady as I explained what happened and scheduled an urgent appointment. By noon, I had a plan in motion. Packing was easier than I expected. I pulled down suitcases from the closet and started with the essentials. Madison's photo albums, my jewelry, the files he thought I never looked at. Every item I placed in the bag felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. This wasn't running away. This was me clearing the battlefield before the war began. The lake house was next. That house had been in my family for generations before I sold half my stake to fund his firm. I still had enough ownership rights to list it. I called the realtor, explaining I wanted it on the market immediately. She hesitated. "Are you sure, Helena?" But my tone left no room for doubt. I wasn't just selling property. I was ripping away his weekend escape, the place where I now realized he'd probably taken her. By late afternoon, the wheels were spinning. Bank accounts secured, lawyer ready, house on the market, suitcases packed. For the first time in years, I felt in control. And that's when Richard finally noticed. I was halfway through boxing up books in the study when I heard the front door slam. His voice thundered down the hall. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I didn't even flinch. "Exactly what you forced me to, Richard. Taking back what's mine." He stormed into the room, face flushed, eyes darting to the half-packed boxes. "You froze the accounts. The bank called me." "Good," I said, taping a box shut. "Now you won't be tempted to waste any more of our money on your little girlfriend." His jaw dropped, like he couldn't believe I'd said it out loud. "Helena, you're overreacting. It was nothing, just a distraction. Don't throw everything away over this." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "A distraction? 20 years of my life, my money, my loyalty, and you dare call it a distraction?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to do this. We can fix it. Let's just talk." I shoved the box into his chest, forcing him back a step. "No, Richard. Talking is over. You had your chance. Now it's my turn." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not the fear of losing me. He'd already made peace with that. It was the fear of losing everything he thought he owned. And I promised myself he would. The fallout started faster than even I expected. By Monday morning, Richard's perfect little world had cracks spiderwebbing through it. The first call came from the bank. They confirmed my name was the only one authorized on the accounts now. Richard, furious, tried to raise hell at the branch downtown, demanding access. I heard about it from one of the tellers I knew, a woman who'd watched me deposit inheritance checks for years. She told me with barely disguised delight how Richard's card had been declined when he tried to charge an expensive lunch. The staff whispered as he stormed out, his pride bruised before he even stepped onto the sidewalk. Meanwhile, the mistress, I'd finally learned her name, Sierra, started panicking. Without Richard's cards to flash, her designer habits dried up overnight. Friends told me they'd seen her arguing with him outside his car, her hands flailing while he snapped back, red-faced. I pictured her nails scratching at his arm, the same way she'd clawed her way into my marriage. Let her feel the itch of disappointment now. Our social circle reacted just the way I knew they would, with judgment masked as pity. The Gala humiliation was still the talk of Chicago's upper tier. Clips of Richard scratching himself mid-speech had spread online, turned into GIFs, memes, even TikToks with captions like "cheater rash" and "karma looks good on him." Clients began backing away, concerned more about reputation than loyalty. His phone calls went unanswered. His name stopped appearing on invitation lists. I didn't hide. I showed up at luncheons, hair pulled back, shoulders squared, wearing the pearl earrings my mother left me. People leaned in with hushed voices. Are you okay, Helena? But behind their sympathy was awe. They could see I wasn't broken. I was calculating. And that terrified them almost as much as it terrified Richard. Family was next. My brother-in-law, Nathan, called me late one night. His voice was tight, irritated. Helena, what's going on with Richard? Dad's furious. He said the firm can't survive another scandal. I almost laughed. Maybe your brother should have thought about that before humiliating me in public. Nathan exhaled sharply. Look, I don't care about your marriage. But if you keep going down this path, you'll destroy everything for all of us. His words were meant to scare me, but they only confirmed what I suspected. Richard's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional, financial, generational. Every step I took toward reclaiming what was mine also loosened the foundation his family stood on. I slept better that night than I had in months. Then came the flowers. White roses, delivered to my condo with a note written in his familiar handwriting. I'm sorry. Let's talk. Don't do this. I didn't even bother reading the rest. Straight into the trash. The next day, he showed up in person. Madison and I had just finished dinner when the buzzer rang. I knew before I looked who it was. His voice crackled through the intercom, urgent and desperate. Helena, please. Just let me come up. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I pressed the button, steady and cold. No, Richard. You lost the right to step into my home the second you stepped out with her. Helena. I cut him off. Go scratch somewhere else. I hung up, leaving him standing on the street. Madison peeked through the blinds and whispered, He looks small. And he did. A man once so towering in confidence reduced to pacing the sidewalk, running his hands through thinning hair, shouting up at windows that stayed shut. It hit me then. This was only the beginning. The real consequences hadn't even arrived yet. But the cracks were widening, and soon the whole facade of Richard Simmons would collapse. The second confrontation wasn't planned. That's what made it perfect. It happened at one of Chicago's busiest restaurants, the kind of place where tables are packed elbow to elbow and reputations are built by who you're seen dining with. I'd gone with a few friends from my charity board. We were halfway through salads when I heard his voice. Loud, familiar, and arrogant. The same voice that used to smooth-talk me into forgiving anything. Richard. And of course, Sierra was with him, dressed in a low-cut black dress that screamed desperation. They waltzed in like the city hadn't been laughing at them for weeks. I could have ignored them. I could have stayed in my seat, kept my head down, let him stew in his shrinking circle of relevance. But no. Tonight, I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd lost. He spotted me first. His smirk faltered, but he straightened his shoulders, squeezing Sierra's hand like she was some kind of trophy. He walked straight toward my table, his voice booming enough for nearby diners to hear. Helena, we need to talk. I set down my fork slowly, savoring the way every eye in the room turned toward us. Richard, the only thing we need is distance. And from where I'm sitting, you're far too close. A ripple of laughter spread across the room. He flushed, but pressed on. You can't keep freezing me out. The accounts, the house, the firm. You're destroying everything. All because you're bitter. I stood, meeting him eye to eye. Bitter? No, Richard. Bitter was when I cried myself to sleep wondering why you stopped coming home. Bitter was when our daughter showed me photos of you wrapped around your mistress. What you're seeing now isn't bitterness. It's justice. The room went silent except for the clinking of glasses. Sierra shifted uncomfortably, her smile wobbling. This is pathetic, she muttered. You're obsessed with tearing him down. I turned my gaze on her, calm but sharp. Sweetheart, if you think you're immune, you're mistaken. You didn't steal a husband, you borrowed a liability, and the return policy is brutal. Gasps. One man at the next table actually choked on his drink. Sierra's face crumpled, her eyes darting around as whispers swirled. She yanked her hand free from Richard's grip. I'm not doing this, she hissed, grabbing her purse. You're finished, Richard. I'm not going down with you. She stormed out, heels clacking against tile. Richard stood there, abandoned, scratching the back of his neck like he had at the Gala, his power leaking out of him in real time. I leaned closer so everyone could hear me clearly. You built your empire on my sacrifices, and now everyone gets to watch it collapse, piece by piece. Phones were up again, recording every word. I didn't care. In fact, I wanted them to. My line would travel faster than any press release he could dream up. Richard tried to salvage dignity, but his voice cracked. You think people are laughing with you? They're laughing at you, Helena. I smiled. No, Richard, they're laughing at you. And I'll make sure they never stop. I turned back to my table, lifted my glass of water like it was champagne, and toasted quietly to myself. Behind me, the whispers grew louder, spreading through the restaurant like wildfire. When I sat back down, my friends stared at me wide-eyed. One of them leaned in, whispering, "That line, the liability one, it's going to be everywhere by morning." Good. That was the point. Richard wasn't just losing money or status anymore. He was losing the narrative. And once a man like him loses control of the story, he's already finished. Richard never could stomach losing control. So when the restaurant confrontation spread across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, he did what desperate men always do. He tried to spin the story. 2 days later, he sat down for a glossy interview with a local business magazine. The cover headline read, "Richard Simmons, Misunderstood or Maligned." In the photos, he wore a tailored suit and a forced smile, as if the itchy powder and the Mistress's walkout were minor hiccups in an otherwise perfect career. He painted himself as the victim. Helena is a wonderful woman, but she's been manipulated by anger, he told the reporter. This isn't about infidelity. This is about her trying to ruin my firm after 20 years of hard work. It was laughable. He forgot that people don't buy glossy print anymore. They buy raw footage, unfiltered clips, and screenshots. And that was exactly what started circulating. First came the restaurant video. Someone had captured every word of my line to Sierra. You didn't steal a husband, you borrowed a liability. And the return policy is brutal. It blew up overnight, racking millions of views with hashtags like such or borrowed liability, return policy, and Char Scratchgate, a callback to his Gala rash. Teenagers were lip-syncing to my words. Women tagged each other under posts saying, "When Helena speaks, we listen." Then came the receipts. Screenshots of his texts leaked, shared by someone anonymous. He'd been promising Sierra apartments, cars, even a travel fund, all on firm accounts. The messages weren't just humiliating. They hinted at financial misconduct. Screenshots of late-night calls, hotel bookings under fake names, and laughable excuses like, "My wife is boring me to death," spread across feeds. I didn't have to lift a finger. Social media did my work for me. Richard tried to clap back with a shaky video on his firm's official Instagram. "These rumors are unfounded," he insisted, sitting stiff in his office chair. "I'm still the man you trusted with your business. Don't believe everything you see online." The comments shredded him alive. "Bro, your wife is a queen. Borrowed liability. Can't come back from that. He's scratching again. Look at his neck." His followers plummeted. Sponsors pulled away. Even a local news station covered the viral saga, splicing clips from the Gala and restaurant side by side with sound bites from divorce attorneys about what not to do in high-profile marriages. Sierra tried to save face too, posting a pouty selfie captioned, "Sometimes loyalty is the most expensive thing you can give." She deleted it within an hour after the comments dragged her mercilessly. She vanished from public view after that, leaving Richard alone to drown. The firm held an emergency meeting, which leaked almost instantly. A recording surfaced of partners shouting at Richard about reckless spending, social embarrassment, and losing our biggest client. Hearing him stammer excuses on tape was delicious. Meanwhile, I went about my days calmly, dropping Madison off at her classes, attending yoga, and smiling politely when strangers stopped me on the street. "Are you Helena?" they'd whisper. "We just want you to know we're on your side." For once, I wasn't just a silent partner in his empire. I was the voice people wanted to hear. The narrative wasn't his anymore. It was mine. The final nail came from a viral TikTok mashup. Someone edited footage of him scratching at the Gala with my line from the restaurant playing over it like a soundtrack. "You didn't steal a husband, you borrowed a liability." It ended with a freeze frame of his red, blotchy face and the caption, "Return policy activated." It was brutal. It was merciless. And it was perfect. By the end of the week, Richard Simmons wasn't known as a powerful Chicago attorney anymore. He was a walking meme, a punchline in group chats, the face of betrayal gone wrong. And I didn't have to lift a single finger. The courtroom smelled of polish and nerves. Richard sat 2 rows ahead, shoulders hunched, his once perfect suit wrinkled like it had been pulled off the floor. He didn't look at me. Couldn't. The man who once commanded boardrooms with his voice now whispered to his attorney like a child begging his parent for help. The divorce proceedings were brutal, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't need to. I had everything documented. Every dollar he'd siphoned from firm accounts to fund Sierra's shopping trips. Every late-night hotel receipt under aliases. Every transfer he'd tried to hide in shell accounts. My lawyer laid it all out with surgical precision. "Mrs. Simmons funded the early days of the firm," she said, voice sharp. "Her inheritance provided the capital. Her sacrifices at home allowed Mr. Simmons to rise unchecked. And now he wants to walk away leaving her with scraps?" The judge's eyes narrowed at Richard's side. His attorney stammered, muttering about exaggeration and emotional bias. But numbers don't lie. I watched the color drain from Richard's face as the judge froze assets, ordered an independent audit, and granted me sole custody of Madison without hesitation. By the end of that week, the house, the lake property, and half the firm were mine. He'd tried to fight for visitation rights, but the videos, him humiliating me at the Gala, parading Sierra in public, drunken nights caught on camera, painted a picture of a man unfit to put family before ego. His family turned colder than the courtroom. His father, a man who'd once treated me like a daughter, called me privately after the ruling. "Helena," he said quietly, "I want you to know, you did the right thing. Richard's been out of control for years. He'll have to face this without my help." It shocked me. For 2 decades, that man had been Richard's safety net, swooping in to cover debts, smooth over scandals, prop up the firm. But now? He sounded tired. Done. Richard's recklessness had cost him not just money, but reputation, and his father wasn't willing to bleed for him again. Nathan, his brother, wasn't any gentler. "You've ruined us," Richard shouted at him in the courthouse parking lot one afternoon. I overheard as I walked past, unseen. Nathan shoved him back against the car. "No, you ruined yourself. Don't drag me down with you." Then he got in his car and drove off, leaving Richard standing there like a man with no allies left. Sierra, meanwhile, tried to hold on to the scraps of whatever relationship they had. But she was nothing without the designer bags, the fancy dinners, the shiny veneer of success. When Richard's cards stopped working, she grew restless. A friend later told me she was spotted screaming at him outside a motel, calling him broke, before storming off with a new man. She hasn't been seen with him since. The financial collapse was swift. Clients pulled their contracts from the firm, not wanting their brands tied to the circus his name had become. The audit revealed misappropriations that would take years to untangle, leaving his partners to sue him personally for damages. With assets frozen and half legally transferred to me, Richard's accounts dried up. His penthouse lease expired, and with no one willing to co-sign, he had no choice but to check into a cheap extended-stay hotel on the outskirts of the city. Madison didn't ask about him often, but when she did, I was honest. "He's learning consequences," I told her gently. "That's something every adult has to face eventually." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Richard had believed rules were for other people, consequences for weaker men. He'd built a career skating past accountability. And now, the same arrogance that carried him to the top was dragging him into the dirt. One night, I drove past the courthouse after a late meeting with my lawyer. I saw him outside on the steps, sitting alone with his head in his hands. No entourage, no mistress, no allies. Just Richard. The man who once strutted through life with his chin high was now small, slouched, defeated. I didn't stop. I didn't roll down the window. I just kept driving, knowing that this, the isolation, the emptiness, the silence, was only the beginning of his real punishment. By the end of the month, Richard Simmons was broke, disowned, and abandoned. The man who once lectured me about sacrifice now slept on scratchy motel sheets, haunted by the echo of his own downfall. And I, Helena Simmons, was free. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday morning. I signed the last set of documents with steady hands, while Richard slumped across the table, his pen scratching like it weighed 50 pounds. When the judge's gavel came down, it was over. 20 years, reduced to paper, signatures, and silence. I thought that would be the last I'd see of him. But Richard wasn't done. He called twice that night, both times leaving voicemails I didn't bother listening to. The third time, he showed up in person. Not at my condo, he didn't dare, but at the old house we once shared. I hadn't stepped inside since moving out, but I still had a key. Something in me said to go, to face him one final time. The house felt hollow. Furniture covered with sheets, the air stale, no warmth left in its walls. Richard stood in the living room, a shadow of himself. His suit was wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his downfall had physically compressed him. "Helena," he said, voice cracking. "Thank you for coming." I kept my distance. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard, fumbling for words. "I want us. I want to fix this. We can start over. People come back from worse, right? You and me, we had 20 good years. Don't throw it away." I almost laughed. 20 good years? More like 20 years of me holding everything together while he played king. You destroyed it, Richard, not me. You paraded your mistress in front of me. You spent our money on lies. You turned our marriage into a circus. His shoulders slumped, his hands trembling at his sides. I made mistakes. I know that. But I love you, Helena. I always have. Sierra meant nothing. Those women, they meant nothing. The words rang hollow. I could see the desperation in his eyes, but not sincerity. He didn't love me. He loved what I gave him. Stability, reputation, control. And now that it was gone, he thought a few apologies could glue it all back together. I stepped closer, my heels echoing in the empty room. Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't gamble away someone else's sacrifices. Love doesn't cheat in plain sight and then blame the woman you betrayed. His eyes glistened, a tear slipping down his cheek. I'd seen him cry before. At our wedding, at Madison's birth, when his first big client signed the deal. But this was different. These weren't tears of joy or pride. These were the tears of a man watching his empire burn down around him, desperate for someone else to put out the flames. "I've lost everything," he whispered. "The firm, the house, the money, Sierra, all gone. Don't let me lose you too." I tilted my head, studying him. "You already did. The moment you chose them over me, you lost me." Everything after that was just the world catching up to the truth. He took a step toward me, but I held up my hand. Don't come any closer." His lip quivered. "Helena, please. I can't do this without you." And that was the moment. The final clarity. For years, he'd built himself up as this untouchable man, the genius attorney, the provider, the untamed force. Now he was stripped bare, begging for scraps from the woman he'd discarded. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze without a flicker of hesitation. "You're wrong, Richard. You can do this without me. You have to, because you're the architect of your own destruction, and I won't rebuild what you chose to tear down." Silence filled the room, thick and final. His face crumpled, and he collapsed onto the couch, burying his head in his hands. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt free. I turned toward the door, heels clicking against the hardwood one last time. At the threshold, I paused, looking back just once. He was still hunched over, sobbing quietly, the mighty Richard Simmons reduced to nothing more than a man facing the ruins of his own choices. And then I walked out, closing the door behind me. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean. For the first time in years, I breathed without weight pressing on my chest. There was no going back, no second chances, no more tears. Only forward. That night, I slept soundly. 6 months later, my life barely resembled the hollow routine I'd once endured. The days no longer blurred together in a haze of covering for Richard, cleaning up his messes, or wondering where he was late at night. Instead, every morning felt like mine. I woke up in a sunlit condo overlooking Lake Michigan, brewed my coffee without tension in my chest, and sat down at a desk filled with my own projects. My life wasn't about being someone's wife anymore. It was about being Helena. Madison thrived, too. She'd been accepted into her first-choice university, something I'd feared the chaos might derail. Instead, she blossomed. Her professors praised her writing, her independence, her resilience. One afternoon, she hugged me in the kitchen and whispered, "You showed me what strength looks like, Mom. I'll never let anyone treat me the way Dad treated you." Those words carried more weight than any legal victory. It wasn't just my freedom I'd won. I'd passed on a lesson of self-worth to my daughter. Financially, I was secure. The divorce settlement, combined with the half of the firm I now owned, meant I didn't have to worry about stability. But I didn't sit back and gloat. I invested in myself for the first time in decades. I started consulting for local nonprofits, helping them manage grants and budgets. I joined the board of a women's shelter, donating both time and resources. Every move reminded me that my sacrifices hadn't been in vain. They'd simply been redirected. I was finally building something that belonged to me. Publicly, the saga had faded into Chicago's endless stream of scandals. The memes had slowed, the gossip replaced by newer dramas. But every so often, people still stopped me on the street or at charity events. "You're Helena, right? The liability line?" they'd say with a grin. I'd smile politely. I wasn't defined by a single moment, but I didn't mind that my refusal to be silenced had inspired others. Women confided in me about leaving toxic marriages, about finding courage. I hadn't set out to be a symbol, but I'd become one. As for Richard, he was barely a shadow. I heard things, of course. Chicago is small when you've lived in its circles as long as we had. He'd been forced out of the firm entirely after the audit bled them dry. His father cut ties completely, moving his investments elsewhere. Nathan refused to answer his calls. Sierra was long gone. Last I'd heard, he was renting a shabby apartment in a neighborhood far removed from the glittering towers he once called home. No penthouse, no tailored suits, no spotlight. Just Richard, stripped bare of everything he thought made him untouchable. I never saw him again in person. But one rainy evening, walking home from a board meeting, I spotted him across the street. He was hunched under a flimsy umbrella, a stack of papers clutched to his chest. For a moment, I froze, waiting to see if he'd look up. He didn't. He just trudged past, face down, blending into the crowd of commuters. That was when it hit me fully. He was irrelevant. Not an enemy, not even a memory worth bitterness. Just another man the world had passed by. Freedom didn't come with fireworks or parades. It came with quiet, with peace, with nights where I could read a book without my phone buzzing with excuses, with mornings where Madison and I laughed over pancakes without wondering if he'd show up. It came with silence in my heart, the absence of resentment, the presence of possibility. Sometimes late at night, I'd sit on the balcony overlooking the lake and think about the woman I used to be, the one who sacrificed her 20s, who ignored red flags, who thought loyalty was enough to keep love alive. I didn't hate her. She did what she thought was right. But I would never be her again. Now, I was the woman who had walked through betrayal and fire and come out stronger. The woman who could stand alone and not feel lonely. The woman who finally understood that freedom wasn't given. It was taken, reclaimed, fought for. And if betrayal was the price of that clarity, then so be it. I leaned back in my chair, the city lights glittering across the water, and whispered to myself, "This is mine." Richard's downfall was complete, but my story, my real story, was just beginning. Thank you so much for watching this story until the very end. Betrayal and revenge carry heavy lessons, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Or if you've ever gone through something similar, feel free to share your experience in the comments below. Your stories help others feel less alone. If this video spoke to you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one. Every comment, like, and subscription helps us grow this community, and I'm truly grateful to have you here. See you in the next video.